The rain fell in thick, heavy sheets that evening, turning the city streets into a glistening river of reflections. Streetlights shone dimly through the gray haze, making the wet pavement shimmer like glass. Most people had long since taken shelter, hurrying home or to nearby cafes, but there was someone out there moving slowly, struggling against the storm. Lily, a young woman in her late 20s, was soaked to the skin, her hair plastered to her face and neck, and her coat clinging to her body uncomfortably. She had been walking for over an hour, trying to escape a life that had suddenly turned cruel and unmanageable. Her steps were heavy, weighed down not just by the growing roundness of her belly but by fear and exhaustion. Every gust of wind pushed her backward, and she fought to hold her umbrella upright, but it collapsed with a sharp snap, leaving her exposed to the relentless rain. Lily's thoughts were scattered, but a single worry dominated them all, her unborn child. She had been alone for months, cut off from her family, and now she had nowhere to go. She wasn't just afraid of the rain or the cold, but of what might happen if she couldn't find shelter. The city that had once seemed full of opportunities now felt empty and hostile, filled with shadows that reminded her of the people she had escaped. She shivered violently, hugging herself as she tried to move forward. Her phone, clutched tightly in her hand, was dead, its battery drained from the storm and hours of worry. Panic gnawed at her chest, making each breath shallow and her heart beat faster. Meanwhile, Liam Rossi was driving home from a meeting in one of the quieter parts of the city. Known as a Mafia boss, he carried a reputation that made people fear him, whispering his name in alleyways and offices alike. Yet tonight, there was a part of him that was tired of the endless violence, tired of the constant scheming and mistrust. He loved the control and the power his position gave him, but sometimes it left him hollow. The rain had forced him to slow down, the windshield wipers moving back and forth rhythmically as he navigated the nearly deserted streets. That's when he saw her. She was standing near a broken streetlight, struggling with her umbrella, her face wet and drawn with worry. Something about her caught his attention immediately. It wasn't just her vulnerability, there was an unmistakable strength in the way she kept trying to move forward despite the rain, despite the obvious discomfort. And the unmistakable curve of her stomach told him that she was pregnant. For reasons he couldn't quite name, Liam felt an urge to act. The instincts that had made him ruthless in business, the instincts that kept him alive, shifted in an instant. This wasn't about power or money. This was about someone who needed help, and for the first time in a long time, he felt compelled to give it. He stopped the car a few feet away from her, the headlights casting a warm glow on her drenched figure. Lily froze at the sight of him, her fear mixing with caution. She had learned over time not to trust strangers, especially men who seemed powerful. But something in his eyes, calm, steady, and without judgment, made her pause. Liam opened the passenger door and stepped out. The rain soaked him instantly, but he didn't seem to notice. "You can't stay out here," he said simply. His voice was firm but not threatening. Lily hesitated, glancing around the empty street, her mind torn between skepticism and the desperate hope that someone, anyone, might help her. I don't have anywhere to go," she admitted, her voice trembling. It was the first time in months she had spoken aloud her fear of being alone. Liam didn't reply immediately. Instead, he knelt slightly to meet her gaze, ignoring the rain that plastered his dark hair to his forehead. "Then you'll come with me," he said finally. There was no question, no room for debate. It was a statement, a promise, and Lily, against every instinct that had kept her cautious all this time, nodded. Getting into the car, she realized just how cold she was. Her teeth chattered, and she wrapped her arms around herself. Liam started the engine, and the warmth of the car's heater slowly began to chase away the chill. He didn't speak much during the drive, but that didn't feel like silence, it felt like a space where she could simply exist without pretending. The city passed by in a blur of wet neon lights and empty streets, and for the first time in months, Lily felt a small flicker of relief. Finally, they arrived at a safe apartment Liam owned, hidden in a quiet part of the city. It was a modest place, far from the chaos of his usual world, and tonight it felt like a sanctuary. He opened the door for her and handed her a towel. "Dry yourself," he said, "I'll make you something warm." Lily hesitated for a moment, her pride warring with her exhaustion. But the kind look in his eyes pushed her to accept. As she stepped inside, the warmth of the apartment and the scent of freshly cooked food greeted her. It was a strange comfort, but one she had been craving without realizing it. In that moment, as the rain continued to fall outside, Lily realized something. For the first time in months, she felt safe. And Liam, the man who had been feared by so many, felt something unfamiliar as well, a strange pull of responsibility, of care. Neither of them knew what the future held, but that stormy night, their paths had crossed in a way that neither would ever forget. A pregnant woman, soaked in the rain, had stumbled into the life of a mafia boss, and a story was beginning that neither of them could have imagined. After that first stormy night, Lily found herself in a strange new world, one she hadn't expected to enter. The apartment Liam had taken her to was modest but warm, a place filled with the quiet hum of normal life that felt almost unreal compared to the chaos of the city outside and the turbulence she had endured for months. Liam didn't push her to speak or explain herself, he simply provided her with what she needed: clean clothes, hot food, and a safe place to rest. At first, she had been hesitant to accept anything, her past experiences making her wary of anyone offering help, especially a man like him, a figure whose reputation in the city was both feared and whispered about in hushed tones. Yet, there was something in the way Liam moved through the apartment, the calm in his gestures and the absence of judgment in his eyes, that slowly began to dissolve her defenses. She noticed the small things, how he made sure her meals were balanced, how he never asked prying questions, how he always knocked before entering her room. Those tiny actions, simple in themselves, built a foundation of trust that Lily hadn't realized she craved. Liam, on his part, observed her carefully without ever making her feel scrutinized. He had spent his life surrounded by people who approached him with either fear or greed, and this, for him, was entirely different. Lily was vulnerable, yes, but there was a strength beneath it, a determination to survive despite everything stacked against her. Her courage in simply stepping into his car that rainy night had left an impression he couldn't shake. He respected her, not as someone to be protected in the way one might coddle a fragile child, but as a person deserving of dignity, kindness, and space to breathe. Recognizing that she needed more than material support, he arranged for Grace, a trusted nurse who had helped his family in the past, to check on Lily regularly. Grace was everything Lily hadn't realized she needed: gentle, patient, and deeply attentive, guiding her through each stage of her pregnancy while also offering emotional reassurance. The bond between them grew quickly. Lily, who had spent so long feeling alone and unseen, began to sense that she could trust not just Grace but Liam as well, a thought that both terrified and comforted her. The days settled into a quiet rhythm. Liam would leave for meetings and return to check on her, often bringing small surprises: a soft blanket, a book, or even baby clothes he had purchased with care, each item selected as though he had spent hours thinking about what would bring her comfort. Lily, initially resistant to any show of affection, found herself smiling more than she had in months. These gestures weren't grand or ostentatious, but they carried a weight of sincerity that broke through her walls, brick by brick. At times, she would catch him watching her from across the room, his expression unreadable yet soft in a way that didn't belong to the man the city feared. It made her wonder who he truly was beneath the reputation, and with each passing day, the idea of danger felt farther away than it had in years. Trust, however, did not come easily. Lily's past had taught her that people could vanish in an instant, that kindness was often a mask for selfish intent. She would test him in small ways, asking questions he could deflect, observing his reactions, and noticing the consistency of his answers. Liam never faltered. When she admitted her fears, he simply listened, never judging, never offering platitudes. He didn't try to control her or her decisions. Instead, he created an environment where she felt empowered to make choices for herself and her child. The apartment became their sanctuary, a place where shadows of the past could not reach, and within those walls, a fragile trust began to grow into something far stronger. Evenings became moments of quiet companionship. Liam would sit with Lily as she sipped warm tea, talking about mundane things, the weather, the city outside, stories from his past that were surprisingly human, sometimes even funny. Lily laughed at things she hadn't found amusing in months, her laughter tentative at first, then more genuine as she realized the apartment was a place where she could breathe, where she could simply exist without fear. Grace would join them occasionally, sharing advice about the pregnancy or recounting little anecdotes about her own life, weaving a sense of normalcy into the routines of their days. Liam often watched these interactions silently, marveling at how life could feel ordinary and yet extraordinary when surrounded by people who truly cared. As weeks turned into months, Lily's dependence on Liam shifted subtly. She didn't need him to protect her in the same way anymore, she needed him as a companion, a person who offered stability in a world that had been chaotic for so long. Liam, in turn, discovered an unfamiliar part of himself, the desire not to control, but to nurture, to offer something meaningful beyond the power he wielded in the city. It was a delicate balance, one that required patience, understanding, and respect for the unspoken boundaries between them. Slowly, Lily realized that her fear was giving way to something else, a cautious hope that maybe, just maybe, she had found not only safety but also a chance for belonging. And in the quiet shadows of the apartment, with the rain softly tapping against the windows, an unlikely trust was forming, fragile but resilient, a trust that would become the foundation for the life they were unknowingly beginning to build together. As the months went by, life in the quiet apartment began to take on a rhythm that felt almost normal, a sharp contrast to the chaos Lily had lived through before. Each day, the small routines they built brought a sense of comfort and stability, not just for Lily but also for Liam. He had always been a man of control and precision, accustomed to dealing with the unpredictable world of power and crime, but here, in this modest home, he learned to let go of that instinct. He watched Lily navigate the simplest of daily tasks with growing confidence, arranging the apartment, cooking meals, and even tending to small touches like arranging flowers he brought home from the market. Though he had initially helped her with everything, he now found himself quietly stepping back, offering guidance only when needed, allowing her to assert her independence. It was in these quiet moments that he began to understand the depth of her resilience, a strength he had underestimated in the beginning, and it fascinated him how someone so vulnerable at first could hold such unwavering determination. Lily, too, began to grow in ways she hadn't expected. Each day brought new challenges, from the physical toll of her pregnancy to the emotional weight of trusting someone again, and each time, she faced them with a mixture of courage and caution. Liam remained a constant presence, not imposing but ever watchful, making sure she had what she needed without overstepping. He bought baby clothes carefully, sometimes making her laugh with choices that were overly bright or whimsical, and Lily learned to appreciate the humor behind his attempts, seeing that he was trying not just to help but to connect. Grace, their gentle but firm nurse, became an anchor in their lives, guiding Lily through prenatal checkups, offering advice on health and nutrition, and quietly observing the growing bond between Lily and Liam. Grace's presence reassured Lily that the safety and care surrounding her were real, that this wasn't a fleeting act of kindness but the beginning of something more stable, something that could endure. Evenings were often the most meaningful. After a long day of preparing for the baby's arrival, cooking, or completing errands, they would sit together in the living room, the soft glow of lamps illuminating the small but warm space. Liam sometimes shared stories of his childhood, moments of vulnerability he had kept hidden from the world, and Lily, in turn, shared pieces of her past she had long kept locked away. At first, these conversations were cautious, guarded, each of them testing the waters, feeling out the other's boundaries. But slowly, trust deepened, and their exchanges became richer, filled with laughter, small jokes, and subtle moments of tenderness. The sound of rain against the windows often accompanied these evenings, a reminder of the night they first met, of the life-changing storm that had brought them together, and the rain became less a symbol of fear and more a backdrop to a growing sense of security and connection. As Lily's pregnancy progressed, the practical aspects of their new life became more apparent. Liam, who had always been immersed in his world of business dealings, crime, and power, found himself focused on things that had never held meaning for him before. He spent hours researching childcare, learning about newborn care, and even attending prenatal classes with Lily, often with Grace guiding him quietly. It was a humbling experience for him, a world away from the streets and boardrooms, and yet he embraced it wholeheartedly. Watching Lily grow stronger, more confident, and more radiant each day filled him with an unexpected pride. He discovered that his protective instincts were no longer just about control or fear, they were about care, about building a life where someone could flourish under his watch, not out of intimidation but out of genuine support. The apartment, once just a place of temporary shelter, slowly transformed into a home. Liam helped arrange a small nursery, painting walls in soft pastels and assembling furniture with surprising patience. He hung pictures on the walls, carefully chosen to reflect hope and warmth. Little things he knew would surround their child with love. Lily participated actively, selecting items that felt personal, from soft blankets to little toys she imagined Ava would enjoy. Grace often joined them, her hands guiding where needed, her voice offering encouragement, and slowly, the three adults created an environment brimming with anticipation and love. What had begun as a temporary refuge from the storm outside had become a sanctuary, a place where life was being nurtured with intention and care. And amidst it all, an unspoken bond grew between Liam and Lily, delicate yet undeniable. It was not yet love in the full sense, but a connection forged through shared vulnerability, mutual respect, and the quiet understanding that they had saved each other in ways neither could fully articulate. Lily felt a sense of safety she hadn't experienced in years, a peace in knowing that Liam, despite his reputation and power, was someone she could rely on. Liam, in turn, discovered a side of himself that had been buried under years of mistrust and harsh decisions, a part capable of gentleness, patience, and quiet joy. Together, they built not just a home, but a life that, though far from ordinary, was filled with warmth, trust, and hope for the future. In those months, through small gestures, shared laughter, and the anticipation of new life, they began to truly understand the meaning of family, of protection, and of love that was earned through patience, respect, and unwavering presence. The day finally arrived with a quiet intensity that seemed to mirror the first night Liam had seen Lily standing in the rain. The sky was overcast, the clouds heavy and gray, and a soft drizzle fell intermittently, creating the familiar rhythmic sound on the apartment's windows. It was as though the city itself was holding its breath, aware of the significance of the moment that was about to unfold. Lily awoke in the early hours, her body tense but determined. And the familiar knot of fear mixed with excitement churned in her stomach. Liam, who had been awake almost as early, had already prepared everything, checking the hospital bag, confirming the route to the nearest medical center, and ensuring Grace was ready to accompany them. There was no hesitation in his movements, no panic, only a quiet focus that had become natural for him in these months, a readiness he had never experienced before. He offered Lily a reassuring glance, his eyes steady and calm, and for the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to fully lean on him, to trust that he would be there through every step, as he had promised. The drive to the hospital was quiet, punctuated only by the gentle sound of rain on the car roof and the occasional instructions from Liam as he guided her through breathing techniques Grace had taught her. Lily's hand gripped his, and though her body trembled from both pain and anticipation, there was a shared calm between them, a silent understanding that they were in this together. In the past, such moments would have been filled with fear and solitude, but now, with Liam's presence, they were filled with connection and reassurance. Upon arrival, the hospital staff immediately took over, guiding Lily into the delivery room with professional efficiency, while Liam and Grace remained by her side, offering support, encouragement, and comfort. Liam, who had once been accustomed to giving orders and taking control, now found himself holding Lily's hand, speaking softly to her, and marveling at the strength and determination she displayed with each contraction. Hours passed, stretching and bending time into something both exhausting and extraordinary. Lily's breathing grew labored, her face pale but determined, and Liam stayed with her every moment, never leaving, never faltering. He whispered words of encouragement, reminded her to focus on the rhythm of her breaths, and occasionally brushed her damp hair from her forehead. Grace's calm guidance complemented Liam's quiet strength, creating an environment where Lily felt supported, seen, and loved. Every small milestone, the baby's first heartbeat heard on the monitor, the steady progress of labor, was met with quiet cheers, smiles, and deep breaths. Liam, who had spent so much of his life surrounded by danger and betrayal, felt an emotion he could barely name, a mixture of awe, reverence, and profound hope that this fragile, demanding, and miraculous process was happening before him. And then, after what seemed both an eternity and a heartbeat, the moment came. Ava entered the world, her cry sharp and insistent, cutting through the soft hum of the hospital room and the rhythmic tapping of the rain outside. Lily, exhausted but radiant, collapsed against the pillows, tears streaming down her face, and Liam, overwhelmed, pressed a hand to his chest, feeling an emotion he had never experienced in the streets or boardrooms, a pure, unfiltered love and protective instinct, centered not on power, but on life itself. The baby's small fingers curled around Lily's thumb, and Liam found himself kneeling slightly to catch a glimpse of the tiny miracle, marveling at how delicate, perfect, and full of promise she was. For the first time in years, he felt that the future held not just uncertainty or risk, but hope, joy, and the possibility of family in its most real and transformative sense. As the hours settled into quiet, Lily held Ava close, and Liam sat beside them, the three of them forming a small, intimate world insulated from the chaos outside. There were no grand declarations, no dramatic gestures, only the gentle warmth of proximity, the rhythm of breathing, and the shared understanding that life had shifted irrevocably. Grace, quietly smiling, adjusted blankets, offered guidance, and ensured both mother and child were comfortable, but it was clear that the emotional transformation unfolding in the room belonged to Liam and Lily. In that moment, all the years of fear, solitude, and survival fell away. They had endured storms, literal and metaphorical, and emerged with something fragile, yet infinitely powerful, life, hope, and the beginning of a family. The rain continued outside, a soft backdrop to their quiet celebration, and Liam, who had once believed that nothing could touch him emotionally, felt himself changed forever. He looked at Lily, at Ava, and realized that this was more than protection or care, it was love in its most fundamental, undeniable form. The journey that had begun on that stormy night, with a pregnant woman seeking refuge from the rain, had reached a point where vulnerability met courage, and where two people who had once lived in solitude discovered that together, they could create something lasting and beautiful. It was not a story of perfection, but a story of trust, hope, and resilience, of ordinary people facing extraordinary circumstances and finding within themselves and each other the capacity to nurture life, embrace love, and finally, become a family. 1 year had passed since that stormy night when Liam had taken Lily into his car, sheltering her from the rain and from a world that had seemed determined to abandon her. In that time, their lives had transformed in ways neither of them could have imagined. The small apartment that had once been a temporary refuge had grown into a home filled with warmth, laughter, and the soft chaos of a growing child. Ava, now a lively and curious 1-year-old, moved through the space with boundless energy, her laughter echoing off the walls, a sound that had once seemed impossible in the midst of loneliness and fear. Liam, who had spent years surrounded by danger and mistrust, found his life reshaped entirely by her presence, discovering joy in things he had never cared about before, the way she clapped her hands when she was happy, the way her small fingers wrapped around his in a gesture of trust, the way her first words stumbled out in the quiet moments of morning sunlight. Life had softened him in ways nothing else could. The ruthless man who had commanded respect through fear now found himself humbled and endlessly fascinated by the simplicity and honesty of family life. Lily had grown in tandem with her daughter, evolving from a woman defined by fear and survival into someone confident, capable, and deeply maternal. She had started a small business of her own, selling handmade items online, a venture that allowed her to contribute to their household while also maintaining her independence. Liam supported her efforts quietly, never overstepping, offering resources or advice when she asked, but always letting her lead. The dynamic between them had shifted from one of caretaker and dependent to partners in life, each learning to respect the other's strengths and limitations. Their relationship, once hesitant and shaped by trust earned in small gestures, had blossomed into something enduring, a connection that was no longer just about shelter or protection but about shared life, shared goals, and shared love. Even Grace remained a constant in their lives, her presence a steady reminder that family is not only formed by blood, but also by those who choose to be there, offering guidance, care, and unwavering support. Every day in their apartment was now filled with little routines that bound them closer together. Liam would often wake early, preparing breakfast while Ava toddled around in her pajamas, curious about every noise and shadow. Lily would join them, helping to plate the food and laughing at Liam's attempts to keep the small, energetic child from spilling juice or knocking over cereal boxes. What had once been ordinary tasks had become moments of intimacy, of shared responsibility, and of joy. Liam discovered patience in ways he had never imagined, where once he had been quick to anger or blunt action. He now found himself kneeling on the floor, tying shoelaces, or wiping tears and spills, realizing that these acts, small as they seemed, were shaping a life built on love and consistency rather than fear or dominance. The presence of Ava had brought a rhythm to their lives, a heartbeat that reminded them both daily that life could be ordinary, beautiful, and profoundly meaningful, even for someone who had lived in shadows and danger for so long. The community around them had shifted subtly as well. Friends and neighbors who had once known Liam only as a feared figure now saw glimpses of his softer, more human side. The image of the Mafia boss had softened in the eyes of those who mattered, not because his past had changed, but because his present had been transformed by love and responsibility. He had become a figure not just of power, but of protection and care, someone who could bring security without intimidation. For Lily, it was empowering to see him in this light, and it reinforced the sense that their family, though unconventional, born from circumstance rather than tradition, was grounded in the most real and vital of things, trust, respect, and shared life. Together, they navigated the balance of the world outside, where danger and uncertainty still existed, and the safety they had carved within their walls, teaching Ava the values of kindness, courage, and resilience by example rather than instruction. And so, 1 year after that fateful rainy night, the family they had become stood strong, not because their lives were free of challenges, but because they faced them together. Liam, Lily, and Ava shared a bond that had been forged in moments of fear, tenderness, and unwavering care, a bond that continued to grow as they moved through everyday life with the quiet triumphs of love, laughter, and mutual respect. The storm that had brought them together had passed, leaving behind not just memory but a foundation on which to build their future. What had begun as a single act of compassion, a Mafia boss taking in a pregnant woman during the rain, had evolved into a life of shared joy, resilience, and belonging. They were no longer just two adults and a child in an apartment, they were a family, resilient, imperfect, and human, connected by experiences that had tested them, nurtured them, and ultimately brought them to a place of love that was deeper and more lasting than any one of them could have imagined. In the quiet evenings, as rain occasionally returned to tap softly on the windows, Liam would glance at Lily and Ava, feeling the profound satisfaction of a life rebuilt on trust, hope, and the irreplaceable power of family, and he knew that no storm, past or future, could ever shake the bond they had created together.